The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room was charged with an air of anticipation, tension hanging in the air like a thick fog. Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General, approached the podium with a quiet but unmistakable confidence, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment as she adjusted the microphone, her blue blazer standing out in stark contrast against the dark wood panels of the historic chamber. Every eye was on her, every ear eager for what she would say next. Across the room, Supreme Court Justice Amy Coney Barrett sat stoically, her face a mask of composure. She had dealt with political storms before, but this was different. This hearing wasn't just about reviewing her judicial decisions. It was about her past, about secrets that had remained hidden for years, now on the verge of being exposed. Barrett's reputation, carefully crafted through years of legal expertise, now stood on a knife's edge. She watched Bondi, her fingers lightly resting on the polished surface of the desk, her heart likely racing underneath her calm exterior. "Thank you for allowing me to speak today," Bondi began, her voice clear and unwavering, cutting through the tension that filled the room. "I come before this committee not just as a former Attorney General, but as someone who has uncovered something that could change everything we thought we knew about Justice Barrett's appointment process." The room fell silent at her words, the air growing heavier, the weight of her statement hanging over the chamber like an impending storm. Bondi reached into her briefcase and pulled out a sealed folder, its red-lettered "Confidential" stamp glaring in the harsh overhead lights. With a slow, deliberate motion, she placed the folder on the table, sending a ripple of curiosity through the room. Everyone leaned forward, eager, yet apprehensive. What was inside? What did these documents contain? And why had they been kept hidden for so long? "This folder contains evidence of a secret arrangement that occurred before Justice Barrett's confirmation," Bondi continued, her gaze briefly flicking toward Barrett. "One that she has never disclosed to this committee, nor to the American people." Bondi's words hung in the air like a challenge. Barrett's stoic expression didn't waver, but a slight flicker in her eyes betrayed a momentary crack in her composure. The truth was out there, and it was coming for her. Bondi opened the folder, revealing the first of several documents. As the room's attention sharpened, the chairman reached for his gavel, his fingers tightening around it, but it was already too late. The revelation had begun. This was no ordinary hearing. This was a confrontation that would force the committee, and the American public, to face hard truths about the confirmation process, the integrity of the Supreme Court, and the power of secrets that were never meant to see the light of day. If Bondi's allegations proved true, the ramifications would be nothing short of monumental. But even as the tension mounted, the stakes for Bondi were high. If she couldn't prove her claims, her career, already fragile in the face of public scrutiny, could be irreparably damaged. Her words, carefully measured and precise, were her only weapons, and they would either clear her name or bury it forever. At that moment, in the hushed, tense atmosphere of the Senate hearing room, a battle for truth, justice, and integrity was about to unfold, one that would have lasting consequences for all involved. Bondi paused for a moment, allowing the room to absorb the weight of her words. The committee was silent, their eyes fixed on the documents she had just presented. With a steady hand, she pulled out the next piece of evidence from the folder, a calendar entry detailing a private meeting between Justice Barrett and the same officials who had been part of the email exchange. This meeting, Bondi continued, her voice unwavering, was scheduled the very next day after the email was sent. The timing is undeniable, and the connection between these officials and Justice Barrett cannot be ignored. Senator Ted Cruz, trying to regain control of the room, interrupted, his voice sharp. "Miss Bondi, a calendar entry alone does not prove anything. Supreme Court nominees meet with administration officials all the time. This is not uncommon." Bondi met his challenge with calm resolve. "Senator Cruz, I understand your skepticism. But that's why I have the most significant piece of evidence to present now." She reached into the folder and produced a memorandum, a summary written by one of the officials present at the meeting. As the document appeared on the screen, gasps echoed through the room. The memo outlined not only a meeting between the officials and Barrett, but also specific legal positions that had been discussed in advance of her confirmation. "The implications of this memorandum are clear," Bondi said, her eyes scanning the room. "It reveals a mutual understanding, a commitment from Justice Barrett to align on several controversial legal matters. These aren't just routine confirmation discussions. These are deeply troubling ethical concerns. Justice Barrett remained composed, but there was no hiding the discomfort in her eyes. She leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but firm. "Miss Bondi, I do not recall this meeting taking place, and I can assure you that no commitments were made regarding how I would rule on future cases." Bondi pressed on, unflinching. "You may not recall, Justice Barrett, but the documents speak for themselves. These are not simply allegations. These are authenticated facts." The tension in the room grew thicker. Committee members exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to proceed. Some of the more cautious senators remained silent, while others seemed ready to defend Barrett's integrity at all costs. Barrett, however, was not backing down. "The documents you've presented may be real, but their interpretation is flawed," she said. "The meeting you refer to was likely part of my routine confirmation process, as I met with numerous officials at the time. But I never made any promises regarding how I would rule on any case." Bondi, sensing an opportunity, responded quickly. "I appreciate your explanation, Justice Barrett, but the evidence suggests otherwise. The documents clearly show that certain positions were discussed in advance of your confirmation, and that's something we cannot ignore." The room fell into a tense silence. The stakes had been raised. No one could deny that the evidence was mounting. The question was no longer just about political games. It was about the future of the Supreme Court and the ethical standards that governed its justices. Barrett, however, was resolute. She didn't back down, but rather invited further scrutiny. "I have nothing to hide. If this committee feels that an investigation is warranted, then I welcome it," she said. "But I stand by my record, and I stand by my oath." Bondi nodded, knowing the battle was far from over. The pieces were in place, but the final confrontation was still ahead. As the tension in the room reached its peak, Bondi could sense that she was running out of time. The chairman, sensing the gravity of the situation, cleared his throat and addressed the committee. "We will need to thoroughly review these documents," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of the implications. "But Miss Bondi, I must ask, what exactly do you believe should happen next?" Bondi stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "An independent investigation into these allegations must be conducted," she replied firmly. "The integrity of the Supreme Court is at stake, and the American people deserve to know the truth." There was a murmur among the committee members, some nodding in agreement, others remaining silent. But one thing was clear: the stakes had never been higher. If what Bondi had uncovered was true, the consequences would be far-reaching. The very foundation of the nation's highest court was now under scrutiny, and Justice Barrett's future on the bench hung in the balance. Barrett, despite the mounting pressure, remained composed. She had been through many battles in her career, but this was unlike any other. Her reputation was at stake, and yet she stood firm. "I have nothing to hide," Barrett said, her voice steady, yet tinged with a quiet resolve. "I welcome any investigation that the committee deems necessary. But I stand by my record, and I stand by my commitment to impartiality." The room fell silent once again. The committee was faced with an agonizing decision. On one hand, they had the weight of Bondi's evidence, authenticated and carefully presented. On the other, they had Barrett's unwavering defense, her assurance that she had acted within the bounds of the law and ethical conduct. After what felt like an eternity, the chairman spoke again. "We will convene a special investigation," he declared. "But until then, this hearing will be adjourned." Bondi, her heart pounding in her chest, gathered her papers. The fight wasn't over, but it had taken a significant turn. The truth was out there now, and the wheels of justice were beginning to turn. She had taken a massive risk by bringing this to light, but in her mind, it was a risk worth taking. The integrity of the Supreme Court could not be sacrificed, no matter the cost. As Barrett left the room, flanked by her legal team, she walked with a quiet confidence. But there was no denying the gravity of the situation. The investigation into the allegations would now become a national focal point, and every step would be watched by the public, the media, and the political elite. Barrett's future, and the future of the Supreme Court, were no longer just a matter of legal precedent. They were a matter of public trust. In the aftermath, the media buzzed with coverage, analyzing every detail of the confrontation. Supporters of Barrett hailed her as a champion of justice, while critics saw the investigation as a necessary step in preserving the integrity of the court. But one thing was certain: this hearing had changed everything. For Bondi, the battle had only just begun. Her career was now on the line, as the political fallout from the hearing threatened to overshadow everything she had worked for. But in her heart, she knew she had done the right thing. She had spoken up for justice, and she had put the truth first. And no matter what happened next, that was a victory in itself.